Testing good. Testing, testing.
You got this down.
Yeah, man. What's up, Dr. Scott Sherr?
Cheers.
Cheers, man.
Brother. I felt like I needed to do that. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, right? We've got these little microphones here.
It's just great to be with you, Tony.
It's so good to see you again, man. It's been a while. Traveling a lot.
You've been as you are.
Yeah, exactly.
All over the place.
All over the place.
But home is where your heart is, right? Which is with you.
It, man.
So
yeah, exactly.
as you go, so you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Speaking of the heart, we got oxygen, you got the lungs.
Yeah.
So we're at the Bay Area Hyperbaric Oxygen Therapy Center.
We are today.
Yes.
I happen to be here usually about 2 days a week.
Okay.
I come over here and I see patients that are involved in understanding how their conditions, whether they have them or if they're just looking to optimize their health, can be improved by going in a high oxygen environment, which are these chambers that you have seen.
Yeah, so these are like glass chambers.
Yeah, so there's glass chambers, there's steel chambers, there's soft chambers. They all have the same technology, basically, but all different pressures, all different strengths of oxygen, let's call them, oxygen doses. So the more pressure you put on a chamber, the more pressure plus oxygen, the more oxygen goes into the body, basically. Okay. So hyperbaric oxygen therapy, it's called, it's oxygen chambers or whatever. It's increasing atmospheric oxygen, atmospheric pressure. So you combine the two together, you drive more oxygen into the system, and you cause physiologic change to help with healing, basically. I call it like the massive accelerator, the massive synergizer. It's not mutually exclusive to most other things that you would do as well. So if you're looking to heal, like you're going to go get surgery and you're going to take your anti-inflammatories or you're going to do physical therapy, hyperbaric therapy is just going to speed up the process.
Okay.
So that's what I love about it. So I don't have to jump on anybody's toes and say, you need to do my therapy. My therapy is the only way. No, this is something that can help you synergistically with what you're already doing.
It's already complementary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have colleagues across the world that are doing hyperbaric therapy simply for anti-aging because we know it helps with blood vessel growth in the brain, in the heart, and even in your genitals. Interestingly enough. Yeah. There's just a paper that was published on MRIs of the penis, interestingly enough.
Oh, yeah. This is great, man. Speaking of getting hangry and horny here.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, yeah, but it's not my penis. It's somebody else's in the diet. It's funny because I just did a talk on this particular topic, and I showed a picture of my brain on MRI, like in an MRI scanner, something called a diffusion tensor image, which is an image that looks at the functional scan of your brain, looking at how your brain's actually working, not just a static image of like an MRI or a CT scan, but how blood is flowing and how the metabolism is working. Now, so I showed a picture of my brain because I did the diagnostics when I was in Israel visiting them. But then the next slide was a picture of the penis on an MRI, and I didn't even think to tell people that it wasn't mine.
Right.
But it's not. It was in a study paper. And it was funny. I was with a colleague. She's like, you got to be sure you tell people that it's not yours.
I know there's a little association there, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the two brains.
Yeah, the two brains, exactly, yeah. So we know that hyperbaric therapy increases stem cells naturally from the bone marrow, which is where they're produced. They get released into circulation, which helps with healing, helps with inflammation, helps with injury. We know that we increase the number of blood vessels that are produced as well. So that's what you need. You need blood vessels to get to tissue to oxygenate it, right? Or to get the nutrients that are in our blood vessel system to get to those tissues and help them keep healthy. So that's what I do here.
That's awesome. So like, how does this process work with oxygen? Like, how does oxygen improve healing or even performance?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways it's doing that, but there's the acute way it's doing it. And sort of like you go into a chamber and acutely you get a lot more oxygen in the circulation. So that's really good, especially if you have areas that have had injury areas. So like, for example, if you had a trauma, if you broke something or if you had a limb almost amputated or something, right? You have a lot of damage to tissue. What hyperbaric therapy is going to do is allow oxygen to get to that tissue to prevent it from dying. So if you have like a blockage, for example, and like blood flow can't pass, but oxygen still can diffuse into the tissue beds outside of the blood vessel. And when you have a lot more oxygen in circulation, you can go further. So you can prevent more tissue downstream of that injury from breaking down. The other thing that can happen in the acute setting is that when you have blood vessels that are blocked and then they open up again, all the downstream blood vasculature and all the tissue starts degenerating, and then you get blood flow through it again. It causes more damage, actually. It's called reperfusion injury. So it can be nasty, and so hyperbaric therapy can prevent some of that from happening. Now, what I should have mentioned is that we have oxygen carrying capacity. Like we have these cells in our body called the red blood cells that carry oxygen from our lungs. We take a deep breath, 21% oxygen in the air that we're breathing now.
Yes.
Okay, only 21%. That's all we typically need to do most of what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
That oxygen gets carried on the red blood cells all throughout our body and all throughout our tissues. And it gets delivered to our tissues, right? So then the red blood cell comes back to the lungs after delivering that oxygen, carries more, and the circulation continues. The cycle continues.
Right.
Now, what hyperbaric therapy does differently is that it doesn't just oxygenate the red blood cells. It actually diffuses oxygen directly into the plasma or the liquid of our blood. By doing that, you can increase the amount of oxygen you have in circulation by like 1,200% or more.
Okay.
So you can use that extra oxygen to make energy at the cellular level,
right,
and also to deliver oxygen to tissues that may be at risk for dying, or tissues that are infected. For example, if there's an infection that doesn't like high oxygen environments, so those can be the infections like that happen in your mouth or happen in your gut, happen in soft tissues as well, like MRSA, for example, or Lyme disease. It can help actually kill those bugs directly because of the high oxygen environments.
Okay.
But over time, what hyperbaric therapy does is actually have an effect on epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study of how the environment interacts with your DNA. In this case, we're giving you a stimulus of high oxygen. That oxygen is affecting your DNA. It's causing an expression and suppression of various genes that are responsible for inflammation, for growth, for programmed cell death or the death of tissue, to either prevent it or for sometimes we actually need tissue to die. So it depends on the process.
Okay.
But so one session or a couple sessions of hyperbaric therapy cause an acute rise in oxygen levels, help prevent tissue from dying, decrease inflammation, help with stem cell release. And then a protocol of hyperbaric therapy helps recreate that scaffolding that tends to degenerate over time, whether it's natural aging or if it's from a tissue injury, whether it's concussion or whether it's a foot injury or an ACL tear or a surgical incision. It's going to help in the short term in the way that I mentioned, also in the long term, helping recreate those tissue beds and scaffolding of, I like to think of it like a building, right? Like if you have a scaffolding on the building, that's what keeps it up.
Okay.
And then if you don't have that, the tissue deteriorates just like a building would.
Provide structure.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So the
Okay.
structure, yeah.
Got it. So when you have pressure, which is the hyperbaric part, and then you infuse oxygen, is that all the oxygen like going into the tissue, like through the tissue or through respiration?
So it's through breathing. Yeah, it's
Okay.
all through breathing. Yeah. So because it has to be, you breathe it in and then you pressurize it. So like I mentioned, I think 21% oxygen in the air that we're breathing now.
Yeah.
In the air that you breathe in a chamber is usually somewhere around 100% oxygen. And so you increase the amount of oxygen in circulation by breathing more of it and then pressurizing it. You can't just breathe more of it and get the same effect, because pressure, by physics, it's a physics law called Henry's law. The more pressure you put on a gas, in this case oxygen, the more of that oxygen gets driven from the gaseous form into the liquid form.
Okay.
And that liquid is then diffused into the plasma, the liquid of our blood, and then it's free-floating oxygen just going where it needs to go. And so that gives you more oxygen carrying capacity. I often think about like somebody like Lance Armstrong, for example.
Right.
People that want to increase their oxygen carrying capacity. There are two ways to do it. Either you increase the number of red blood cells in circulation, and that's done through either altitude training or doping. So using banned substances like epogen or autotransfusing, so giving yourself your own red blood cells back. An alternative to that is going into a chamber, hyperbaric chamber, increasing your oxygen carrying capacity, and it's a shorter term stimulus. However, it still has the same short-term effect, which is increasing that oxygen carrying capacity. So I have athletes that come and see me, and they use it for endurance kinds of. They use it for endurance, for example.
Yeah.
They can also use it for recovery, so they can use it to help recover from injury or recover from even a workout, because you're increasing that oxygen carrying capacity to help tissue heal. Because as you know, like from exercise, you're causing like micro tears in muscle, so they get to rebuild in a stronger way.
Right.
And what hyperbaric therapy is going to do in that capacity is help with that process.
Okay. So it's increasing the mitochondria's abilities, or actually increasing the concentration of mitochondria as well?
So mitochondrial density is also occurring.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Mitochondrial density is thought to be something that's related to, there's lots of reasons why that it goes up and down. Exercise also increases mitochondrial density. We think that what happens in the chamber is it's not the oxygen itself that's doing it, but it's likely the pressure that's occurring on the blood vessels and on the cells that's causing the mitochondrial density to go up. If you go into higher altitude, you also create more mitochondria because you need more bang for your buck. The cells need more of them, more mitochondria floating around to harness as much oxygen as possible to make energy.
So like, let's say like altitude, so there's less oxygen up in those levels, so you're forcing an adaptation of the body to create more red blood cells,
right,
in order to carry more oxygen to be able to enable you to like survive up there and not like fatigue.
Right.
Okay.
Right, exactly. So that's what happens with anybody that does altitude training, is that the natural body's hormones, the one I mentioned before, epogen, gets released and more red blood cells are stimulated. Also, something else happens that where more oxygen on the red blood cells, we have 4 sites. Typically at sea level where we are now, it's very rare for more than 2 to come off of those 4. But if you're at altitude, usually more come off at the tissue level because there is this dissociation that occurs at higher altitudes, basically hormonal shifts and chemical shifts that allow more oxygen to be delivered to the tissue naturally. But at the same time, more red blood cells are produced, and you get more, obviously, oxygen carrying capacity that way too.
What's the history of hyperbaric oxygen therapy? Like, how did somebody just discover that this is the process in which to put somebody in a little container, pressurize it, and throw in oxygen?
It's kind of crazy, actually. It started, I think the first time they described hyperbaric conditions was like 1664.
Really?
So what they did was they took a sealed steel chamber, and they attached it to an organ bellow, those old organ bellows that have like the flutter, and they either sucked air out or pushed air in. And it was about for almost like 300 or 200 years, they realized they thought it had certain medical benefits if you either put air into the chamber or you sucked air out. So nobody knew really what oxygen was. Nobody knew what was in air, but they knew that if you sucked air out of a chamber, people got better under certain conditions. And if you pressed air into the chambers, people got better in other conditions. So that was kind of the first foray into understanding what hyperbaric conditions were. Mm-hmm. Because when we're talking about hyperbaric, Hyper, we're talking about increased atmospheric pressure. We're simulating the pressure that you would feel if you were under a certain amount of seawater, actually. And that's how the terminology all came, because they realized, so seawater, hyperbaric therapy really became a therapy because of bridge building, because of diving. Because what they found is that if a diver was under a certain amount of sea level water, they came up too fast, or if a bridge builder was doing the same thing, they were underneath the water building the bridge, but they came up too fast, they would have these severe neurologic symptoms. Sometimes they would die. Sometimes they would be paralyzed. In fact, I was talking to somebody today who was a Navy diver who had actually seen this happen, where you have these severe symptoms happen. And then what they realized back in the 1800s was that if you put them back into these chambers, like for example, if you're building a bridge underneath the water, their symptoms would go away. So they would suddenly no longer have paralysis or severe symptoms of neurologic compromise. All those symptoms would go away. So what they realized is that they had to figure out a way to do this outside of putting people back under the water if they were very sick, for example. So that's how hyperbaric chambers were developed.
Okay.
And so they were developed for decompression illness. They were developed for the bends. And so the gentleman I was speaking to today told me a story from his own experience, and I had seen this too, where a diver comes up too fast, paralyzed, can't move, completely paralyzed because coming up too fast causes a gas called nitrogen to turn from a liquid into a bubble, into a gas. And then that gas actually blocks blood flow, causing tissue death behind that gas bubble.
Wow.
And so what hyperbaric therapy does is pressurizes that gas bubble and makes it go back into liquid form.
Gets dissolved back into the liquid. Okay.
So the gentleman I was speaking to today, and others have seen this, and I've seen this in other capacities. You put them into a hyperbaric chamber, they walk out of the chamber. So they're paralyzed going in, and they walk out. They may be limping a little bit, but they're walking.
Right.
And I saw this in patients with carbon monoxide poisoning. Same deal, where you hyperoxygenate the body, competing for the carbon monoxide molecule, and outcompete it, and then they were paralyzed on a respirator, they walk out of the chamber. So dramatic, right? And then when I realized it was just oxygen and pressure, I was kind of shocked, because so many things we do in medicine are so complicated and are so unhelpful. And I was like, well, what can this be used for if it's just oxygen and pressure? And this is back in like 2007. And I was just phenomenally surprised by the research that had been done, that was undergoing at the moment, at the time when I was looking at it in 2007, in patients with brain injury, patients with strokes, that are, because there's a medical reason for hyperbaric therapy. It's approved by insurance for like 14 different things.
Okay.
But on the investigational side, things that are not covered, like, it's just like amazing how much research was being done. And now over the last 5 years, it's just out of control. We're talking about brain injury and Lyme disease. We're talking about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. We're talking about patients with strokes, I think I mentioned, and patients that have reflex sympathetic dystrophy or really bad complex regional pain syndromes. And, and just amazing what we're doing. But
wound healing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Really so I did all this research. Like in 2007, I was like getting all excited. I'm this medical student. I'm like, oh my God, this can do all these amazing things. And then I'm like, well, really, what is it doing? What is it really doing? Really what it's doing is healing wounds from the inside out. These are macrocosmic wounds that we can see, you and I, like on the outside, or they can be microcosmic wounds at the cellular level. But that's what it's doing. And it does it through decreasing inflammation, reversing low oxygen states, stem cell release, and killing infections or killing bugs. That's it.
Right.
That's all it's doing. And then, I have somebody that comes to see me and they say, well, Scott, I have, any number of things, right? I have migraine headaches. It's a really common one. People have migraines. And then I go, well, do these 4 things apply? And the answer is probably, right, one of them. And the most common one is inflammation.
Okay.
And then you have to think, okay, this is an inflammatory cascade that's causing a migraine to happen. And then I take another step back. And this is where all the people that you and I know so well come into play, like Dr. Harry and others, where there is an integrative approach that is extremely important. Because these chambers are really good, but they're not good done in a silo most of the time.
Okay.
They're really good done with an integrative approach. And you and I have spoken about this.
Yes.
With your technology, with the machine that you use. And I've spoken about this with Dr. Harry and cannabis and CBD. And I've spoken to Dr. Dan Engel with plant medicines and some other ideas of healing the brain and pulsed electromagnetic field technology and psychologists and psychiatrists and other, and like I can just go, but
nutrition, exercise,
right,
like all that.
But then I there was this time maybe about 6 months ago where I was almost overwhelmed by it because of like, there's so many things that people can do. Like, what is the core that everybody should do? And suddenly manifesting out of thin air was Dr. Ted and this program called Health Optimization Medicine, which is a program that looks at foundational cellular health. Because Tony, that's really where it starts. That's really where all of us evolved, which is cells. We are cells.
Yeah, we're zillions of cells.
Trillions of them, right?
Yeah.
And not only just ours, right? We have inside of us like a 10-to-1 ratio of non-human versus human cells.
Yes.
So we are just one part of this gigantic organism that, you talk about auras, you talk about, we have like this bacterial load all around us that we're communicating with people all the time. And so,
well, speaking of auras, we're literally emitting electrical signals.
yes.
So, you don't have to like go into the whole woo-woo and say,
No.
like, I see like rainbows coming off of you, but like literally our tissues are run, our cells are run by electricity.
Right. It's all electric, man.
Yeah.
And so, and not only our cells, but bacterial cells and fungal cells and,
Right.
and virus and
So,
viral cells.
so we're literally what we are as a human being, as a host. We're hosting all these different cells.
Right. But we want it to be a symbiotic relationship. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the way our environment has been comprised since basically the Industrial Revolution, but
Yeah.
really especially the last 50 years with it's a very sad state of affairs with our food supplies and the vitamin mineral contents of everything that we eat, the toxins that we breathe and the toxins that we eat.
And then the electrical smog, all the different signals coming from varying technologies out there.
Yeah, yes.
So-
It's all had this effect. And then we're seeing so much more chronic, complex medical illness as a result of it. And not even that, just fatigue and just not, and just people thinking that they're well, but they're just not sick. That's something Dr. Ted, one of our colleagues, likes to say. So, and then you take some stuff out, or you take out, the most common example is just sugar. You take out sugar for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, I can't believe I feel this good. Like I'm pooping every day, and I have energy. I don't have all these dips during the day. And
Yeah. So my pain went away.
my pain went away.
Yeah.
So as I said, I was like, maybe it was even longer. It's like a year ago now, right? I was like, I got this. It's like, it's this integrative approach and it's all these things, but it's kind of overwhelming for people and there's so much they can do. But then I said, I just had a meeting with we all met in January of 2017 and he gave me this paradigm.
Dr. Ted Achacoso.
Dr. Ted Achacoso. Yes, I should say his full name. Yes, Dr. Ted Achacoso. And he gave me this paradigm. It was very simple. It's like, let's just work on the foundational health of the cell. The side effect of that is that most people are going to feel a lot better. And then I said, well, that makes a lot of sense. And then so health optimization medicine is really a foundational approach to health. And then once you have that in place, then everything else is easier. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, now massive shift. Things like CBD, other technologies, microcurrent, other technologies like breath work, for example, even like low tech technologies, right? Things that have been around forever. You bring all this stuff together. Now you've massively amplified,
Right.
accelerated. So my approach used to be like 7 different things. Now it's just health optimization medicine, hyperbaric therapy, other technologies, and other practitioners that may be helpful. And
Right.
so
Yeah, because a lot of people are overwhelmed with all this information and like
Right.
trying to do like conquer Rome in one day kind of thing.
Totally, yeah.
And so with health optimization medicine, you're going back to the root of life, which is the cell.
Right.
And so what's that process look like for somebody? Because that sounds like the lowest hanging fruit.
I mean, I think it's the umbrella, right? I think that we all need to be thinking at this level, right? If we're not thinking at the cellular level, we are missing something likely very significant. Even in like top performers, in people that are top athletes that do a really good job, people that you and I know, I look at their cellular levels of B vitamins or toxins, and I'm like, wow, these guys only need 1% to 2% more performance to run that 50-yard dash in like 1/10 of a second less. And that could change their entire career.
Absolutely.
Right. But for the rest of us regular people, we can still benefit. In fact, we benefit even more because we're not even as close to as optimized as these guys from a performance side, and women, guys and women. So, so health optimization medicine is a framework that relies on, three basic tests: looking at cellular health, looking at gut health, and looking at food sensitivities. You take this data, you put it into a matrix, you interpret it in a very specific way, and then you create a supplement profile that goes along with what your deficiencies are, your toxicities are, and how you can balance, replete, detoxify. Basically, you take out some foods that you're really sensitive to. There's more to it than that, but that's the basic of it, right? And then you throw in things like looking at circadian rhythms, looking at evolutionary biology, looking at epigenetics a little bit more. So I talked about hyperbaric therapy as an epigenetic stimulus. Everything around us at all times is an epigenetic stimulus, right? Our environment, our lights, of course, the crappy lights in this room, the shitty lights in this room. I was going to say, I'll just say it.
Yeah, it's man.
Yeah, no, I don't mind, Chris.
Free for all, man.
I know. This is Hangry and Horny over after all, right? I got to imagine you can say shitty on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so everything is our environments are always playing a role on our DNA. And we have great researchers. In fact, somebody you should talk to, a lady that works at Stanford. Her name is Dr. Lucia Aronica from Italy, who does epigenetic research. And we're looking and we're seeing now we're starting to get some markers in the blood now that we can actually see some of these epigenetic markers, but they're really difficult to see. But we know that they're coming, and we know that our environment is all around us at all the time, and there's not much we can do about it all the time. So the idea is if you work on your cellular health, you work on your gut health, you work on an evolutionary biology approach to your diet. So for example, your heritage is where?
It's a bunch of stuff, man. Yeah, it's like, I guess, Greek, Italian, there's Japanese, there's Southeast Asian, Filipino, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Indian, a little Middle Eastern, everything but Black, African. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was like a mixture of so many different things. But the 23andMe genetic test, right?
Yeah. So for people like you, it's a little bit harder because like you have all these sort of variable evolutionary backgrounds. Because for somebody like me, like I grew up in New York, but my heritage is mostly Russian, right? So you can sort of trace that back to see what was my evolutionary diet, right? What was my diet for thousands of years, right? And what was the diet of somebody that was born in Greece or somebody that was born in Japan? And you can kind of take that approach along with looking at some of your food sensitivities, and that's kind of where you want to go, you know? So for somebody like you that has like 13 different things, a little bit harder, right?
Right. I have to run the experiment and like write down how I feel after I eat kind of thing. Yeah.
But the key though, is that if you start off with looking at the cellular approach, looking at vitamins, minerals, cofactors, toxins, antioxidants, you look at your gut health, you look at allergies and sensitivities, you take out those foods, then you actually have a lot more resilience. And so that even if you
get more robust,
so that even if you eat stuff that's not, evolutionary good for you, you still have the right cellular machinery to help you detoxify. Then you throw somebody in a chamber after going on an airplane, for example, where they're hypoxic, because I don't know.
Which is low oxygen.
Yeah, low oxygen. Yeah. So I'll explain that. So most of us don't realize that when you're in an airplane, you're pressurized at 8,000 feet above the sea, right? So you're getting less oxygen while you're up there. That's one of the reasons why you're jet lagged. It's one of the reasons why you're more prone to infection when you're on the plane. Then the Dreamliners, I think, are 6,000 feet. That's why there's less potential of having jet lag, is what they say.
Yeah.
It's because you're pressurized at a less altitude. So I often have people come in and get hyperbaric therapy afterwards because you're getting oxygenated. So you prevent some of that from potentially happening, some of the jet lag, some of the potential risk for infection, et cetera. But then if you've already optimized yourself, like you're already nutrient optimized and everything else, then you get into a chamber afterwards. It's like, it's magic, man. Like we talk about like
that synergy.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm all about, and then it's funny because people they find me a lot of times because of the hyperbaric work that I do. And I think maybe even you and I met because of that in some ways. And And then I'm like, yeah, I love hyperbaric therapy. I have a passion for it. I know it can help people optimize, synergize, accelerate, wound heal, decrease inflammation. But most of the time, unless you just had a trauma or just had an injury, it's going to be a more comprehensive approach that's going to be the best long-term solution for you. The Israelis, okay?
Right.
So like I went over when I was in Israel. The reason why I mentioned this is a very specific reason. So they have an anti-aging program in Israel. I went over there, I spoke to their docs, and they have an anti-aging program. It's a 60 treatment hyperbaric session protocol.
60
60.
Wow.
So Monday through Friday with the weekends off. They'll do diagnostics before.
Okay.
They'll do some therapeutics during, which they need to work on, but they're working on it. And they'll do diagnostics afterwards. One of the diagnostics that they do for some patients is the penis. They do, for most people, they'll do the brain, and they'll do imaging of the brain, and they'll do it before, and they'll do it after. And like they show me these beautiful pictures of brains that just did not have very good blood flow at first. And then afterwards, it's amazing, the difference. And they have blood markers.
2 months.
2 months. Well, 2.5 months, 60 treatments.
Okay.
So it's Monday through Friday. So we're talking about, so 2.5 months. So, and they show these pictures of the penis or show these pictures of the heart. So they'll have people run on these treadmills or do bikes looking at heart oxygen carrying capacity. So it's called the VO2 max.
Right.
So athletes know about that.
Yeah.
So what hyperbaric therapy is doing is regrowing or actually making the heart a better pump. So more oxygen can get to the heart and can allow it to work better. So, but if you're not changing anything you did before, so for example, if you eat French fries and Cheetos, you get into a hyperbaric therapy protocol like this, your brain is going to get better, your heart is going to get better, your penis is going to get better blood flow. But if you don't change any of the stuff you did before, how long is it going to last?
Right.
And this is the question I had to the Israelis, right? I'm like, are you guys talking about diet? And they kind of demurred a little bit, because that's not their focus. Their focus is on their protocol, but they very much know that. So they're thinking about adding coconut oil. They're thinking about adding certain things and requiring certain amounts of exercise. But what they need is home. They need health optimization medicine, right? That's the umbrella, man. Because if you can get people to go through that and then add hyperbaric therapy to regrow the blood vessels and stem cells and everything else that I've been talking very fast about.
Yeah.
I get excited.
It's so super exciting, man. I mean, so back to the health optimization medicine, you're talking about like before and after testing, so diagnostics, so you actually know what's going on. You're just not just shotgun method throwing a bunch of vitamins and minerals in there, hoping for the best,
right?
Because that's what's going on out there. Everybody's trying to sell some sort of product and say like this works for that, but everybody's different. That's what I love about what you guys are doing. Is you're looking at the cells, but you're looking at the individual, and we're looking at like what kind of results are you getting based on the initial test. Right.
It's super common. Like you see all these studies that this particular supplement's going to stop you from having prostate cancer, or this particular supplement is good for your breast health or whatever.
And they say may.
Right. It's all because you can't do things solo, right? You can't, everything works in the body as a network. So it's important that you are looking at it that way, but you're also doing it in a way that's measured, and that you're not just taking things either that you don't need or taking too little of the things that you do. And so, and there's challenges. Like if you're taking too many antioxidants, for example, you could potentially make your own body's antioxidant system work worse, and that you require the external pills. That's not a good thing either, right? So there's all these aspects of, and you and I see this a lot, that you just, oh, this looks cool, I'll take that, I'll try this and do this. And it's just not a measured and quantified way of going about it.
Yeah.
If you really want to have significant improvements, like you'll see studies that come out. This one, I think another one just came out a couple of days ago. Vitamins are bad for your health. Vitamins will kill you.
Well, you've seen that research. There's research on vitamin C that's like saying that it'll cause like heart issues, or
they can. Vitamin C can cause kidney stones in people too.
Yeah.
And so everything has to be done in my world with a purpose, in the sense that you are looking to see there's a person in front of you, right? So then there's nuance to that.
Yeah.
It's not just about looking at data, but looking at that data and reflecting that data on the individual in front of you.
Yeah.
It's the art of it. You know,
Right,
there's
the
not
context.
Yeah, the context. And
Yeah.
I think that gets lost too. You know, it's not just about data, and I get that, but they can't be done without each other, in the sense that, like, if you're just looking at numbers on a piece of paper, you can start that way, but you can't continue that way, in the sense that, like, you know, I can close my eyes, look at paper, make supplement recommendations. That's okay. But as somebody's going through a supplement process, or through like a balanced detoxification process, you need to be there to see the nuance of it.
So
Because
that's the art.
that's
so
the
you're
art of
talking
it.
about the science, which is the data,
Yeah.
and then the art side, which is a lot of practitioners
Yeah.
miss, is the nuances. And what does
Yeah,
that look
doctors
like?
miss that. But I think practitioners like coaches and others outside of the medical system are better at that, because they have doctors have lost the art of the relationship and
Yeah.
the art of long-term relationships with patients, because
Right.
it's difficult to do. It's difficult because they're relegated to an insurance model a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah.
You're forced to spend a few minutes with each patient before
Yeah.
you can't spend that time to really get to know them, have
Yeah.
a conversation, really find out what's going on in their life. It's like, hey, what's going on? Oh, this is the symptoms. Here's the prescription. Okay, next person.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you can get only so far if you don't do both.
Yeah.
You know, and so one of the challenges I've had with hyperbaric medicine is that the quantification hasn't been there, but it's coming. You know, the Israelis are doing it, like I mentioned, and I think part of me on I've always been looking for how you have an integrative approach. And, you know, I grew up, my dad's a chiropractor, right? So I grew up very outside of the medical system. I saw what he could do without any measurement, right? All he had to do was change the diet, adjust the spine, and people would get better.
All by feel mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to that. But I think I think the future is this. The future is the collaboration of data and art. And that doesn't have to be the same person, by the way. It can be people working together in this collaboration that are taking these pieces and bringing them together. Some people are phenomenal at data. Some people are phenomenal at the art of the personal relationship. And
Actually giving a shit and caring.
yeah, and that's huge,
Right.
you know. And I think you have to build on people's strengths and then make collaborative teams that allow those strengths to manifest exponentially.
Right. So there's a place where there's no egos involved.
Yeah, that's always the case, right? That's always the hope.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I think
take credit, you know, people want credit, and it's
I
like,
just-
well,
yeah.
let's get the patient better. Let's get the person.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with my dad about this. So my father, his name's Alan Sherr. He runs a clinic called the Northport Wellness Center in New York on Long Island. My father, he has a chiropractic practice, but he has about 30 different practitioners that work in the building that he owns. And he will refer like crazy. Always. That's always what he's done. He doesn't always get the same referrals, right? It doesn't come back to him.
Okay.
And he's never had an ego about it, because like you and I know, the more you give, the more you will receive organically. But unfortunately, a lot of us, ego-driven, have a scarcity mindset.
Right.
That those patients won't come back to us, or I am not good enough, or I'm not a good enough doctor, or whatever it might be.
Or just admit that I don't have the ability to help this person, but I'm going to give you to somebody that does.
Right. And so I grew up in that mindset, that collaborative mindset. It was, if you give, you will receive. It's not about monetary gain for that. I mean, especially in New York, for God's sakes, it's like a pay-to-play atmosphere, man. So it's like, he was definitely not the rule. He was the exception. So I grew up in that framework. And so as I've created hyperbaric medicine and my integrative approach and health optimization medicine, that's what sort of manifested, is sort of these groups of individuals, these collaborations, with you and with Harry, with Dan, with Dr. Ted, and with Shaker, and with Austin, and
Dr. Carlos.
And Dr. Carlos.
There's like a whole...
Yeah. It's like all these people that'll probably be on your podcast eventually if they haven't been. And that we need to have an ego sometimes. We all do.
Oh, absolutely, man.
But like if, as long as you're aware of when you're using it, you know, like, and like this group of people is very much like that. It's like it's a collaborative spirit. And so that's the beauty of it. And that's where I mean, it happens in my family too, right? I have my wife, and that we have to have a collaborative spirit, or else if she thinks I'm doing, you know how it goes, right? So if you have a bunch of kids to raise, it's got to be a collaborative environment. There can't be an ego involved. And so it happens on the family level, it happens on the sort of the interpersonal level, and it definitely happens on the collaborative spirit when you're looking to be in a service profession, as we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the key is like communication, right? And so that's kind of been lost through technology and sort of like the fast-paced lifestyle, where people are like eating in front of the TV, like talking at dinner, dinner table. So all these like sort of old values are being like replaced. And so, people are texting each other from smartphones in the same room. Yeah. So all these different things are the issues, right? And so it's like, how can we get to a place where it's like, yeah, I'm upset, but frame in a way it's like, hey, I'm upset, and then say what's going on, and then the other person can be like, okay, that person, not take it personally, but just listen. And so that's like the other art, it's like, and that's what I love about like this team of us, that all of us have that ability, that we could tell that we care, we're actually listening, and we're able to.
That's one of your gifts.
Thanks, man. Well, part of being hearing impaired, it's kind of like a blind person, right? But it's something that I think is so important, and it's the pendulum swung so far, right? And so a lot of people are seeing like what the net result of that is, and so to have a that's why I'm like interviewing you. I want to like showcase the world, like who you are. Because, it's exciting to see that in the medical profession. A lot of people are frustrated with doctors, but they have to understand that doctors are forced to sort of be part of that system with insurance and that whole, so it's not the doctor's fault per se, but, and then you have like student loans, you have like all these other responsibilities.
I don't think I could think of a single person I met in medical school that went to medical school to make money. That's not what they really went for. But as they go through the system, and I did it too. I was in medical school. I rotated through orthopedic surgery and dermatology and radiology, which are very high-paying fields. It's like, ooh, that would be nice, $900,000 a year. I could get used to that. I could find out what I really like to do while I do that. And then I was like, that's bullshit. Yeah, I can't. I had to take a step back. I was lucky because I grew up alternatively and I grew up outside of the system. But I said, if I had $1 billion, like money's no object, right? What would I want to do? And I tell medical students all this all the time now, because you get exploited in the process, right? You're working so much, and you're tired, and you're taking tests, and you're in lit environments like this all the time, and you just don't have a good sense of yourself all the time. So you forget. And I'm like, if you had all the money in the world, $1 billion, you put a number on it, like even say 20 million, whatever it is. I like $1 billion though, because it's like so out of the control 3 comma club.
It's,
right?
It's basically the really fuck you club.
Yes. The unicorns. And so if you had $1 billion,
like fuck you money,
you came to medical school to be a doctor. You have $1 billion. What are you going to do? Plain and simple, and that's the question that you need to answer. I think all of us have to answer.
Not even money wasn't an issue.
I mean,
what would you do with your life?
Because money comes if you're passionate about the things that you're doing, and whatever that is. For everybody, it's different. But for me, it was understanding that my role here, I think so far, as I understand it, is to bridge the chasm between the alternative and the allopathic worlds. And the way I've done that initially was through hyperbaric therapy, and I still do. But as I continue the process, the bigger paradigm shift is health optimization medicine, because that's really an anchor. That's the foundation. And then everything else is built on that. And so I feel like I'm in the perfect place to do that. And now it's just about these things coming to fruition with my passion and my excitement and the collaboration from all these amazing people that you and I both know and that will continue to come into our life as we grow and all of this grows. So I'm just happy to be here, man. And then I have a family that supports me, and I have beautiful children that I love and adore, and a wife that I love and adore, and that it's
Who's also a medical doctor.
She's also a doctor. Yeah. So, we just, every day is a beautiful day. And I tell my kids this every morning. It's like, we get to choose our life. This is all, I don't tell them it's all an illusion or it's all a movie, but that's kind of what it is. We get to choose the actors and the players and how we react to things. It's not what other people do to us. It's what we do as a result of what other people are doing around us.
Right.
And so it comes from us. And I've learned that through my children. And I've learned that through being a dad, and having to change my entire perspective of what I thought the world should be. So it all started with that for me, interestingly. And then it was all as a result of that, the expansion of understanding how much ego I really did have in the whole process and how much collaboration was possible if you just let it kind of come down here and let it manifest,
So where did this humility come from?
Where does my humility come from?
Yeah. Like, how did you come to this understanding?
It was, I could think of a couple times in my life, but I think the one that comes to mind right now is having my first child, having my first daughter. When I was still in residency, or maybe I just finished up and I was in my first year of practice. And my life was my life before that, right? I had a regimented life. I was very scheduled. I slept when I slept. I exercised when I exercised. I ate when I ate. And I had control of all that. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have control of any of that again. I was getting woken up in the middle of the night. I wanted my daughter to sleep. She wouldn't sleep. She would wake me up in the middle of, everything. Like, all of a sudden, my world that I had created, because I had complete control of it, I thought, was no longer under my control. And then I realized that, and it took a while for me to realize this, because I still have a little bit of PTSD from that time, because it was so traumatic for me, because it was like, oh my God.
It was some sort of wake up call.
It was a huge wake up call. Yeah. It was a massive amount of humility that it made me realize that there are bigger purposes. There's bigger things. There's raising kids, and there's like, I can't live this way anymore. I can't live in such a structured environment. I'm protecting myself, but also closing myself off from so many opportunities just because I'm scared about what might happen. And so I think that was one of my first major shifts.
Okay. Because at that point, it was just you, ego, solo.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden you have some other...
Right, I was 30 years old, right? Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, our 20s are a time where we find our independence, but we also find our ego in some ways, right? This is who I am. This is what I am. And this is what I'm going to be. And then maybe our 30s are, I don't know, for me, my 30s have been a time of beating the shit out of that and saying, no, that's not, none of that. It's true. And the real truth is much more inside of me than I ever realized. Nothing is external. It's all internal. And then I don't know what the 40s are going to bring. You can tell me, right? You just turned 40. So,
yeah, it's a level of confidence and not giving a shit.
Yeah. See, yeah, I think that's beautiful.
But again, I never had kids either. I just had 4-legged children.
Right. It doesn't have to be, but that was what it was for me. But I think for everybody, it's a different process. I mean, that was the first thing for me was kids. The second thing I think the second major shift for me was then I had a couple business endeavors that I thought were rocking and rolling, and then they were great. One of them you know about,
yes.
But another one even before that,
okay,
that just crashed and burned, and I was completely shattered by the process. And I realized, why am I so shattered by this? What? I shouldn't be shattered by this. This is and as you both know, for every failure, there's about 1,000 opportunities. Versus for every opportunity, there's an opportunity, right? So the ROI on failure is so huge, but you don't realize that in the present moment. And so
when shit's going down,
man. And so it was really the exploration, I think, and the compounding of of those experiences of having with my children and those business endeavors that failed that really put me on the process of personal development and sort of self development, right? And knowing that it came from me. And this is throughout, everything that we've spoken about, learning about hyperbaric therapy, having a family, meeting you at the Bulletproof Conference in 2016. Like all of this was sort of happening on that arc, right? So, but none of this stuff happened until I realized it was about, working on what was inside of me that mattered. And then everything else started happening.
So how did your life unfold? I mean, was it, if you look back on making the connections with those dots, looking back 2020 vision, would you did hyperbaric oxygen therapy just fall into your lap? Like how did you end up in that place, and what about it sparked your interest in it versus the whole bunch of other directions you could have gone with medicine?
I think I always came back to that one question for me, which was, if I had $1 billion, what would I do? I knew I didn't want to be a conventional doc from the outset. I had to hide that a lot of times when I was going through medical school. My friends, my good friends, knew I was crazy, in the sense of the things that I believed. But most people thought
you're eccentric, basically.
I talked about diet. I talked about things that they thought, and most conventional doctors don't put a lot of stock into. That's okay. But I kept it on the down low for the most part. But I always knew deep down that I loved connecting and helping. And I always knew that I was a collaborator, not doing things on my own. So I think for me, my process started there. And I always knew that whatever I was going to do was going to have those pieces in play. It wasn't going to be conventional. It wasn't going to be solely alternative. It was going to be in bridging divides, in bridging the chasm.
Yeah.
And it was just how exactly, you
right.
know? And all of that is manifested over time as I've worked really hard to do it. But at the same time, I love the process. I used to hate the process, but over time I've grown to love the process. And as I've loved the process and the failures and the opportunities, that's really where the acceleration happened. It happened very slowly at first. Learning about hyperbaric therapy, I thought this was very cool.
How'd you find out about that?
Oh yeah, I found out about hyperbaric therapy in a trauma center in Baltimore that was using it for acute traumas for people that had carbon monoxide poisoning and flesh-eating bacteria infections and soft tissue infections. And I saw them go into this gigantic chamber in the basement, and I saw them come out of the chamber looking so much better than when they first went in. So I asked the technicians what they were doing, and they just said it was a combination of oxygen and pressure. And I was like, that's it? That's all it is?
Yeah, not some complicated chemistry.
So that's why I got excited about it, because I knew how simple it was. And then I did more research, and I saw what it was being used for in other countries, what it was being approved for in the US. And I realized it could be that bridge. It could be that what I was looking for. I tried regular primary care in a conventional insurance setting for a year, just about cut my head off. The people were very nice. It was nobody's fault. It was just the system is broken. For me, it wasn't going to be the system where I felt I could have the greatest effect, the greatest potential for change. So I stopped that. I went into I work in the hospital still. I do some acute care. I think hospitals are really good at acute care, but I don't think they're good at anything else, really. So if you have an acute issue, you go to the hospital, right? You get drugs, you get antibiotics, you get pain medications if you need them. Although Dr. Harry, can give you CBD or THC or something. But there's other ways. But again, acute trauma, acute care, hospitals are really good at, but they're not good at anything else. That's not entirely true. There's some screening mechanisms that are relatively good. Colonoscopies are good. Mammograms are okay. There's some controversy there. Prostate screening, they're okay. But over and abundantly, conventional care is not very good at anything else from a longitudinal perspective. So
yeah, in terms of like giving you like the most bang out of your life in terms of wellness and feeling great and having energy, feeling alive.
Yeah, and we talk about lifespan and we talk about health span.
Mm-hmm.
So lifespan is how long you live, and health span is how long you're healthy. And unfortunately, even though lifespan might be going up slightly, health span is dramatically going down.
The quality of life, yeah.
Quality of life.
Right.
So that's what I care about. And that's what most people I think do care about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you want to live 30 years demented, or do you want to live 30 less years with great health? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully there's a happy medium where you can really have an increased health span for a longer period of time. And then you croak, you die.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all of us want, ideally, right? Is that you have 85 years of amazing life, and then the next morning you're dead.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Or you choose to die. Like, you know what? I'm good. You know?
Just like take a nap and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think ideally that's what we'd all like.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the goal, right? Is however many years you have, they're good years. And that when you're done, right? Maybe you get cancer, then you die in a week, or whatever it is. But the key, I think, the shift that's coming is this health span idea. And that's what hyperbaric therapy can be used for in its appropriate setting. That's what the Israelis are doing. That's what health optimization medicine is all about. That's what these other technologies really are kind of dancing around. But they're dancing around in sort of this collaborative spirit where their use can be exponential. So if you're talking about breath, or you're talking about other technologies or whatever, neurofeedback or lights or heat and cold and, you fill in the blank. Fasting.
Right.
Yeah. They're all part of this ecosystem of working on health span. But it's challenging, like I said in the beginning, because there's so many things you can do.
Right.
So, and it's helpful to have somebody to be a part of that process with you, whether it's a coach or a friend or a collaborative, as it were, to say, maybe you should think of this first, given what's going on, And so what I've been sort of feeling is, and I was just on the phone just a couple minutes ago talking about this, you need to have these sort of, families, these collaboratives of people working together where somebody can come in, a client, a patient, whatever, drop in and sort of get conducted around various practitioners and coaches and other things that becomes their ecosystem, that they feel comfortable, and then they become probably a part of those collaboratives as well, as they feel better, get better, perform better, feel better, Magic Flow Bus style.
Yeah, flow better.
Yeah,
exactly.
And flow better. So, and that's what the Magic Flow Bus is all about, giving you a taste of some of these technologies, some of these practices. It's a collaborative in itself.
Yeah, and then you're in a community because environment's stronger than willpower. So,
that's the highest indicator of happiness, as you and I both know, is your community.
Your tribe. Right.
Like, you can eat hot dogs and bacon with the most preservatives and everything, but if you are happy, you are going to live longer than somebody's unhappy that eats a vegan diet, right?
Right.
Hands down.
Just because of what? Stress.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stress, community, oxytocin, man, the love and warmness, the hormone itself being released when you're touching somebody else, when you're hugging somebody else, when you're having a great conversation. You can't replace that. So
you lose track of time. That's the whole flow state thing, is that you're in the present moment. You feel like somebody, you're connecting with them, that you're engaged. You see that they're listening, you're listening back, right? So you're having a shared experience that you wouldn't be able to do if you were solitary.
Right. I think that's what you were doing. And that's what I'm facilitating, I hope, is that creating these collaborative communities where this happiness quotient goes up through the fucking roof for everybody. Not only the people that are sort of the facilitators, the helpers, but also the people inside the community that are being helped, and that they, in response, become the helpers as well, because now they're part of this collaborative, and that in their own ways, whatever that is. And it's a small way, large way.
We got to be honest, man. We're just trying to create another cult.
If you call it
drink the Kool-Aid,
Yeah, that word is so mired in terribleness, but it's true.
It's
I mean,
cult. I like to
yeah.
say it in a positive
Yeah,
connotation. A cult is a culture.
Yeah,
You know, something
that's
that
good.
like creates some sort of space of renaissance where
Yeah.
you know we're sharing ideas, we're connecting with each other, we're looking at like how we can like optimize the quality of our life and
Yeah.
then the quantity. You know, like let's do the best that we can, and then let's do it for as long as possible with
Right.
each other. And
Yeah.
using all these
Yeah.
amazing tools that we have access.
we're not like exclusive, man. Like, come, help,
Yeah,
be
totally inclusive,
Like,
right.
you're not gonna have to wear any crazy sneakers or take any, like,
Yeah.
but like if you want, you can wear sneakers. I don't care. But Austin can help you there. I don't know what shoes you should wear, but anyway.
Yeah, right. Get some 5 fingers.
Yeah, there you go. But I think that's what it is. It's like hyperbaric therapy, health optimization medicine, microcurrent, magic flow bus. It's
good
all
food.
good
Yeah,
food. It's all about, all of it is based in community. All of it's based on connection, collaboration, and the rest will just come.
Right.
The rest will just be.
Like, how did we lose touch of that, man? Like all the simple things of life, which
Yeah.
is like you have a family, there's always going to be some sort of issues like through any kind of community, but how did we forget to like eat food together? I mean, that's like the big thing that creates like connection, that kind of puts a pause on life, and then
Yeah, that's why you and I are here.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to, and I think, it starts with us.
absolutely.
And that's what we're doing, man.
So back to because I'm really curious about the hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Okay.
So like,
Yeah.
what's going on with oxygen and pressure in that combination? Like, how is it working so effectively for? And then secondly, it seems like because you're in the chamber, like it's not just like one area. It's like your entire body systemically is like being benefited, even if you're just working on a wound or a broken bone. All the other tissues are also being benefited being
Right.
in that chamber.
Right. I mean, like I mentioned before, I think it's an accelerator of the wound healing process. So all the cells that are responsible for healing need to be stimulated to be produced when you have a wound, for example. Hyperbaric therapy just makes all of that happen faster. So it helps with cartilage cells being produced. It helps with bone cells being produced. It helps with connective tissue cells, all of that related to stem cell release. But it's the combination of oxygen and pressure that drives more oxygen into the body. And it's the oxygen itself that gets delivered to the tissues, to the cells in the tissue, and the cell's DNA that allows this whole process to happen.
So the DNA is getting switched on. So that's the epigenetic
Yeah.
signal from the environment. And so the DNA is basically communicating to the cell inside of all the different like organelles, like ramp it up, like
Yeah, exactly. So the DNA is static. However, there's proteins that get transcribed from the DNA, depending on the stimulus onto the DNA itself, that allow the body to manifest either more inflammation, less inflammation, depending on what's needed. When hyperbaric therapy is involved, the proteins that are expressed more are those that are responsible for growth. So bone growth, cartilage growth, connective tissue growth, blood vessel growth. And then it also produces more proteins that are responsible for decreasing inflammation. So helping with decreasing inflammation as well. And then also helps with programmed cell death. So preventing cells from dying that may be at risk if they're not getting enough blood flow, for example. So that's how hyperbaric therapy is working at the cellular level. And that's really what it comes down to. Long-term improvements in the chamber are the result of that stimulus.
okay. So that high oxygen and pressure also eliminates viruses and bacteria.
Yeah.
And,
It directly can kill those things. It kills bugs that don't like high oxygen environments.
they're basically anaerobic.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I saw that flesh-eating bacteria case or a couple cases in medical school, that is an anaerobic or an organism that does not like high oxygen environments, causes gas to form. So hyperbaric therapy is this massive systemic stimulus of oxygen that kills those bugs directly. So saving tissue, saving this really terrible infection from spreading very fast. And I've seen it, man. It's nasty. It's a nasty infection. So people have to get amputations all the time. So if you can prevent amputations, that's usually a good thing.
Oh, hell yeah, man. Definitely.
Yeah.
So the bugs that are in the body. So what's causing these things to sort of multiply in the body? Like if a human being is I guess not living a certain lifestyle of like getting circulation and flow in the body, so basically the tissues start to like I guess the blood vessels contract, the body can't.
They start dying. The blood vessels start dying because, I mean, if you're living a bad, like a toxic lifestyle.
Yeah. What example of a toxic lifestyle that
usually
causes people to be a lower oxygen capacity or carrying individual?
It usually starts with your diet, usually toxins in your diet and things that you're eating that are causing inflammation, because really what it comes down to, Tony, is it's all about inflammation. So every process in our body gets deregulated, malfunctions when you have inflammation. And inflammation starts with your gut and what you're eating. So if you're eating foods that are there are a lot of inflammation that's causing, if you're ingesting lots of toxins in your environment, causing inflammation, that's going to manifest in degeneration, disease, deterioration of blood vessels, of tissue, of cellular processes down the line.
So inflammation meaning like heat,
so inflammation,
like too much heat in the cells.
So I think the best way to think of inflammation is not so much heat, but as in factors, as in things that get released from cells when they're trying to protect themselves, when there's toxins around, so that there's the production of inflammatory mediators, things in the body that cause a reaction. That reaction may not be overt, it may be a mild one, but then as a result of that reaction, the body has to be under a stressful state. So it's stressfully trying to combat these toxins and this inflammation. And as a result of that, you deplete antioxidants and you deplete your natural stores of vitamins and minerals and cofactors. And as a result of that, your whole body starts deteriorating and that inflammation gets out of control.
And this is like happening like chronically, over time. So it may not be like an overnight thing, like acute inflammation.
Typically not. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so with that chronic inflammation, people like vitality, wellness, and health start to just get lowered, and then their immune system's compromised. So they just can't fight off these bugs, essentially.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's funny because back in like the 80s or 90s, maybe early 90s, my father used to tell me, food is the most powerful drug you have. I used to tell my friends that, and they used to laugh at me in the 1990s, but there's nothing more true. Right. Nothing. I mean, nothing, because really that's what we do every day. We eat for the most part, unless you're fasting, of course. But so it's about the food that we eat, and but it's also understanding, and I think measuring what should we be eating and what shouldn't we be eating, right? And having an evolutionary perspective there to see it, because it all comes down to inflammation. Because inflammation is what causes heart attacks and strokes. It's not atherosclerosis itself. It's inflammation that causes these reactive plaques from happening because there's inflammation. That's the challenge. You're trying to kill plaques or trying to decrease the amount of arterial sclerosis or whatever, but that's an end process. That's not the beginning of the process.
Right. It's not fat itself that's like basically clogging up these blood vessels.
It's inflammation.
So inflammation is breaking down the inside walls of the blood vessels, and then
causing
fat or plaque is getting stuck up in there to repair it. Okay.
It happens in the brain too. It happens everywhere, So it's all inflammation, Tony.
Yeah. So, but obviously some inflammation is good, right?
Sure. Yes. Short-term hormetic inflammation, right? Hormetic inflammation. The idea that you need to have short periods of stress to rebuild the body better. Exercise, sauna, cold, all common, short-term stressors that are good. Fasting is also good, right? Very good short-term, but long-term, like marathon runners die early, right?
Yeah.
The first marathon runner, right, ever, like he went from one city, the city of Marathon, to the city of Athens or something, and then just died as soon as he got there. Right. Not good for you, right? Mm-hmm. And so you'll see this often, right? You see these, people that look like they're in amazing shape, but they die of heart attacks.
Yeah.
Because
fitness is not necessarily a correlation to health.
because they have
there's
massive
a little
amount,
bit,
yeah,
a little
totally.
bit of fitness, but not extreme.
Because they have
fitness.
massive amounts of systemic
Inflammation.
inflammation that's happening because of all the stress of doing all that exercise over time. So it's really about inflammation is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and it's exciting too because of all this information that we have now. So there are people that are doing their own experiments with nutrition to find out what works best for them. You guys have the home protocol that if somebody really wants to like dial it in and like really know what's going on in your body with the help of the team of experts.
And we're going to certify docs and practitioners across the world. And so we're not trying to keep this as a couple home doctors. It's going to be coursework that's going to be provided to doctors and practitioners to get certified in, and then they can use it in their own practices, whatever their practice might be. If they're a chiropractor, they can use it in their practice. If they're an osteopath or a nephrologist or a neurosurgeon, if they really, whatever it is, they can use it in their practice. It's outside the insurance model, so it's a cash-based practice right now. But truthfully, my goal of this whole thing is like, this is going to move the needle. If we even had the data, we could get it to fellowships and we get into medical schools, and that's even better.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Absolutely. So let's touch on like people actually paying for their own care, because most people want to have insurance.
That's a good point.
Pay for all these things, including hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which I'm sure insurance does cover.
For some indications. Yeah.
So let's look at like the compounding effects that come from investing in yourself.
Oh man, and this is a question I get a lot, and as you know, is these. I know you get it as well, Tony, because when you're doing things outside of the insurance realm, you are paying for it, right? Initially, but you are not paying for it over the long term as an investment in your health. And so, with Dr. Ted Achacoso, one of my colleagues and yours, and a mentor of mine says, how much did the original MRI scans cost, and how much benefit did that have, right? So you can think of it from a conventional perspective, like those machines do a lot of good. They cost a lot of money initially, but you paid for them and they had a lot of great benefit, right? And so that's what's happening with health optimization. It's going to cost more money right now because it's a new process. Hyperbaric therapy, same thing. But as it gets more out there, there will be a cost savings over time, just plainly on how much it costs. But the investment in your health is so huge.
The ROI, the long term, yeah.
Yeah, but you have to have a preventative mindset. And unfortunately, humans are not set up to have that. So more of us are understanding that, but we are almost all reactive people. We don't think proactively. It's not in our DNA. It's not in the tribal DNA, really. It's about protecting the tribe, protecting our families, or it's the happy puppy. Like, where's the squirrel? And those kinds of things. Like that's how we're programmed.
Distracted, right? So I guess because the next question I was thinking of was like, how did we come to this path ourselves, right? And so I just thought about all the health challenges I had when I was younger, from like allergies to having fluid in my ears, having tubes surgeries put in there, like the tubes to be put in. But it was kind of like my mom was always adamant about like how I could be like healthy. So she, would pack like healthy lunches and made us like pack our own healthy lunches. She always like cleaned everything like from mold. And she because I was just more sensitive than my sister. And, it was just like accumulation of things. And then, of course, like losing a kidney, and it's like, oh shit, I only have,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. So I only have like one. And I had that realization. It was sort of like a brick in the head, like a wake up call for me. It was like, hey, I only have one. I need to like change how I live for the rest of my life in order to keep this one lasting as long without having to get an implant per se. So was that the same for you? Like,
I didn't have the,
or I guess your dad was.
Yeah. I didn't have the health challenges. I think it was me just being raised in an environment where health was the focus. And,
but it could have gone the other way where you were just rebelling against that,
it could have.
Right?
It could have. But I had a lot of support. I had a good upbringing, and I didn't feel the need to rebel. Some people do, and that's completely reasonable too. I did my own rebelling in my own way, but I think for me, it wasn't so much health challenges as much just seeing what health could be, and then also how simple it really could be. Very easily taking out dairy and stopping allergies and asthma, and very simple changes that I saw my dad do. And I said, wow, this is amazing. And I think for me, although I went away from some of those tenets over a little while, of course, you're young and eat pizza and crazy stuff and whatever, and you have fun. And then
especially when you're on your own,
Yeah, of course, you need to do that. And everybody needs to go through that process, but I think overall, for me, it wasn't individual health challenges like you. I think for me, it was always knowing that my purpose was, as I mentioned, connection, collaboration, and help, and helping others. And so that's where it always started. And then through my personal development process and my sort of my reborn feeling of what that meant, that sort of evolved over the last several years through the work with health optimization medicine and hyperbaric therapy, and seeing the results and seeing how I can help people. That's really where it all came together for me. So
I'm thinking about like people that are out there that are struggling, but they're just so it's a habituation, with their habits, that they don't realize that their lifestyle and their choices are putting them in a place. So, I guess it's just a human nature thing that until you actually hit some sort of place where, is some kind of personal rock bottom, or you get a scare where you go into the doctor and they're like, hey, you continue this way, this is sort of like the result. That's not going to be. That's
the most common way people start making changes. And even me, I mean, with my mild, in comparison, health challenges over the years, it's like not until something happens, like, oh man, like for example, I gave myself a concussion, and it wasn't a huge concussion, but it was a concussion. And then for the first hour or two afterwards, I was like, I'll be fine. I don't need to do anything. I'm okay. And then I was like, and 2 hours later, I'm like, what am I doing? I have chambers. I know what to take. Like, but we all go through these denials of like, I'll be fine, And so even people that are kind of in the know of understanding still have these patterns that we can fall into.
I'm certainly guilty because I have like the technology to work on myself, and the last thing I want to do is work on myself. Sometimes it's kind of like that practitioner dilemma.
They always say doctors are the worst patients, but or practitioners are the worst practitioner, like as far as the worst patients as well, whatever you want to say. People that, it's a common thing. That's all I'm saying.
It's so easy for us to like help other people, but not ourselves, not like give us that like self-care and that self-love sometimes,
Well, this has been fun, Tony.
Yeah, man. Are you good with time or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to run.
I was going to ask you that. So it's awesome. I was super, super glad that we had the time to do this. And
I'm speaking to Dr. Dan, actually. He and I have a call. So.
Awesome. I need to reach out to him too. Any last like words or any way that people can find out about you online or?
Well, first of all, thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Scott.
This has been a real pleasure. And I know how much passion you have behind this and everything you do. And thank you.
Thank you, man. I'm really grateful for you.
I think my parting words would be, thanks for listening. It's been fun to speak with you. I know that you have a lot of time to speak to other people. I know that those that are listening have a lot of time to do they don't have a lot of time to really, there's so much out there to listen to and to do. So I appreciate the time that if you spent the time, all of us all together with us, thank you. And I would say, if you want to find me, there's a couple of different ways to do it. The best way is to go to my website. It's integrativehbot.com. The word integrative, the letters hbot.com. Or you can just Google my name, Scott Sherr, MD. Make sure you put the MD or else you get some guy from Sony. Sherr is my last name. And I'm here. It's like I do hyperbaric consultation worldwide. Health optimization medicine is coming online. We're looking for doctors, practitioners that are interested in get certified. And I'm here. I'm available. I'm present and looking to help. So if I can't help, I usually can find somebody that can, just like you.
Dr. Scott Sherr, thank you so much, brother.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.